The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Beautiful day out there. Thank you for tuning in. And we have a book that is definitely going to be on your must-read list. It is called Codename Lise. It's the true story of the woman who became World War II's most highly decorated spy. I found it on Amazon, and if I could just brag about the book before we speak to the author, who, by the way, is Larry Loftis. The book is now number one. I'm looking at the listing here, and gosh, so many great reviews on this book. It's number one in a couple of categories. It's number two in the weapons and warfare nuclear category. Oh my gosh. It's number three in the espionage category. It is a nonfiction book, by the way. True story.
Yes.
Let me lower this music. That's a little bit too happy to talk about World War II. There's a weird romance about World War II, isn't there? Maybe because it's so many years ago now. I don't know. The music from that era always sounds romantic to me. Larry Loftis, good morning, Larry. It's an honor to have you on our show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And Robin said you are a Gator. You went to the University of Florida?
Absolutely. 7 years in Gainesville.
Wow. Where are you now?
In Orlando.
Okay.
But I went undergrad in law school at Florida.
Oh, man. You should come up and do the show in the studio. It's nice to have people
Exactly.
visit us. Well, thank you for doing this. Who is Lise? How did you find out about her?
Well, after I wrote my first nonfiction thriller, Into the Lion's Mouth, it was about another spy, an MI6 spy who inspired the Bond figure. But I looked for a long time and couldn't find anybody, and it was a little bit depressing, actually. And then I came across a book by a German spy catcher, I should say, Hugo Bleicher, and he talked about breaking into and demolishing one very large spy network called Inter Alley in occupied France. And then he moved on, after he finished that one, he moved on to casing and breaking another one called Spindle, and he talked about this woman, Lise. Well, he only knows of her code name, which she went by, which was Lise. Her real name was Odette Sansom. But anyway, I found her through him, because once I saw that, I'm like, God, this is fascinating. And then I started digging and got into the UK National Archives and found all about her. And amazing, the more I read, the more I liked it.
We had a guest on talking about the spies during the Revolutionary War, and the conversation that the part of it that I just wanted to mention to you was that we were told that spies were the hardest figures of our history to research because they were spies, so everything was hidden. Did that present a problem for you in this case?
It does a little bit, only because with World War II figures, that information was classified. All of it was completely classified. You couldn't get into any files. You couldn't see anything about people. And then around 1980, they started gradually releasing files, on both sides, both the UK and the US. So they started about 1980 declassifying files, and by now, most all of them have been declassified. So now you can access them.
So who was she? Was she from France originally?
Yes, she was born and raised in France, very French, but moved to England, was in England when World War II broke out, and that was sort of how she was recruited, because she she heard a call on the radio from the Royal Navy asking for photos of France, because they're thinking, D-Day and all of that, and they want to see the coastline pictures. And so they made this generic radio appeal for people to bring in photos. And she sent in photos that she had from France. She had lived around the coastal areas, but she sent them to the wrong address. She didn't send them to the Admiralty. She sent them to the War Office. And then the War Office sent them to the SOE office, Special Operations Executives, which were sort of the commandos that Winston Churchill had charged to set Europe ablaze. And so from there, they saw them, and they saw this woman, this girl. She was only probably, 17 or so at the time.
Wow.
The photos. And so they recruited her because they knew that she would speak French, and she knew France well. And that was what they really wanted, were couriers who didn't speak French with an accent. how many of those will there be in England?
Yeah,
Not
right,
many.
right.
She was really a diamond in the rough, and when they found her, they're like, guys, we got to have this woman.
Wow. Okay. So she was she involuntarily recruited to be a spy, or it sounds like from the little I read. Now, Robin read the whole book, but I'll just tell you I read some of it. But it sounded like she was.
She was reluctant. Yeah, she was reluctant because at the time she was a housewife. She was a mother of three. And she had zero military training. She was about 29 at the time, and she didn't think she was right for the part. And they basically said, "Well, we'll train you. We'll train you how to do this." She's like, "Well, I don't think I'm the right person for this."
Oh, wow!
Well, they had figured out. I mean, talking to her, she was her grandfather had died a war hero's death in World War One. And the Germans, of course, had killed her father. The Germans had just taken her mother's home. So she was the prime candidate to be recruited, and it didn't take long. And, of course, she went through the training and all that, and then she was shipped off to France.
So again, going back to the research in order to do this, did you have to fill in any blanks? And is it it's not fictional at all, so you probably, everything is something you found somewhere, right?
Well, I mean, that's what every nonfiction writer has to do with the type of books I write. I mean, and it's all detailed in the preface of the book, which is once I started and decided, hey, I think this might be the right woman to do, then I basically order everything there is on the person. In this case, this woman, and so you start with the actual archives, which are in the UK files, the UK National Archives, and those are the actual, her actual debriefings. With British intelligence, as soon as she got back, and then you've got the memoirs from the German spy master. Her commanding officer had written 3 memoirs, so I read those, and so you basically read everything that's out there on her. But it's 100% nonfiction. Every quote in there is verbatim from a primary source.
Oh wow! And can I ask about her photo? And was that something you found later on, or did you always know what she looked like?
The photo that's on the cover?
Yeah.
That was that photo, and if you see on the cover, that left arm that's cut off next to her, that's her commanding officer, Peter Churchill. And they are that photo was taken after the investiture ceremony where she was given the George Cross. She was the first woman to receive the George Cross. And right after that investiture ceremony at Buckingham Palace. Okay,
your signal faded just a little bit there. What did she receive? The what cross?
The George Cross. It's England's highest honor, other than the Victoria Cross is like our Medal of Honor, but she's not in actual combat. With a rifle in the middle of a battle, so she's not eligible for the Victoria Cross. But the next highest is the George Cross for valor, and she was the first woman to receive it.
Your book is very intriguing. It's one of those that I couldn't put down. And the time that she was in prison and antagonized by Henri, he was he was an interesting character unto himself.
No doubt. Kind of slippery, but I guess Henri is the proper way to say his name in French.
Oh, okay.
I would think of Henry, but Bleicher, Hugo Bleicher went by his code name that he used was Colonel Henry or Colonel Henri, and he was very crafty, like a Sherlock Holmes, but he was relentless. And I would think of Sam Gerard. If you saw the movie The Fugitive, I think of Sam Gerard because he was so relentless. This was Tommy Lee Jones, if you remember the movie.
Right.
But he was like that too. He was relentless, but he was also even charming. I mean, he knew when to put on the charm and to be very sociable. He spoke French fluently. He spoke English. He spoke some Spanish. So he was like a chameleon. He could be anything in any situation.
And he was preying on her fondness for Peter because he was in the same prison.
Right. He. There's no doubt he was smitten by Odette. I mean, she's young, she's beautiful, she's committed to duty, and duty is very highly revered by Germans. And everything he saw about her, he liked. I mean, he had to arrest her; that's his job. But everything he saw about her, he liked. And there's no question he was smitten by her. And was asking her while she's in prison, "Can I take you out to see a play? Can I take you out to see the ballet? Can I take you out? The magic flute. Mozart's magic flute is playing." And she always said no. No. Not only no, but hell no. And so he was rebuffed, but it didn't really diminish his infatuation with her. And at first he thought that she was just playing this romance of Peter, that maybe that was just part of a trick they were playing, but it was true, and he quickly learned that. And I think he and Peter became friends. I mean, he did take Peter out for lunch once. Mm-hmm. So it was a very, very interesting character.
So in writing the story, you have also included a love story.
Well, I didn't include it. It was there. I mean,
okay.
I just reported what was historical, but yeah, it was there. And that was the appeal for me, is that the story not only is this incredible World War II story of heroism and valor, and I think of the movie Catch Me If You Can, because there's a chase aspect, because Hugo is obviously chasing them around France, but within the World War II story, there's a love story between Odette and her commanding officer, Peter Churchill.
But it wasn't all a bed of roses. I mean, she was tortured, she was beaten, she was starved. And
yeah, they both were.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I tell people, it's like Unbroken, only Louis Zamperini is a woman. Mm-hmm. And she got it worse than he got it. And Zamperini, great story, but he didn't get any medals for valor. And she did. I mean, she got basically every possible medal she could get for valor, including France's highest honor, the Chevalier de la Legion's honor, however that's pronounced. But she cleaned the board in terms of medals.
The large picture of the information we got from World War II seemed to indicate that women didn't play much more than a supporting role. As time went on, however, we've heard stories like this, and we need to hear these stories, because I think we did a disservice to women by making it appear like we write history in such a way that kind of leaves out women, left out a lot of African American fighters who played a role in that war. So a lot of the people who played a role in that war were not represented. Let me say in the movies, and maybe in the books they did, but in the movies.
Well, part of that is our fault in the United States that we don't read history, because she was famous in 1950. She was famous. Because the George Cross received so much attention in England, and there was so much media fanfare about it, there was an original book about her. Everything's still classified, so it could only provide a very small snippet. But there was a book about her in 1949, and then in 1950 there was a movie about her, which was called Odette, which was the fourth top-selling movie in England in 1950, and it was released in the U.S. in 1951. But we just Americans aren't very good with history, and at least here everyone forgot about her, but they know about her in England, and a lot of people know about her in the England former colonies like Australia and New Zealand and so forth. So I think it's mostly just that.
Did she eventually marry Peter?
Yes, she. Oh, well, that's a spoiler. I bet.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know.
I better not say.
I didn't know. Okay, that was just a guess on my part. Okay, were you able to talk to any of her children? Were there any children? Or
very good question. In fact, I correspond daily with two of them, two of Odette's granddaughters. The oldest of which named her daughter Odette, because she was very close. The granddaughters were very close with Odette, and particularly the oldest one, Nicole, was extremely close. They lived next door to each other in England. And her grandmother, she said, I owe everything to my grandmother. She taught me how to cook. She taught me how to dress. I still have some of her clothes. I wear them. We're the same size. And so, yeah, I correspond with them daily.
And she was a truly, truly amazing woman. When she returned, what kind of welcome did she receive from her children, and how old were they?
Well, they were young, they were still young, but that brings up an interesting. I got to tell you an interesting segment of that. But they were still young. But of course, they didn't know at the time. They were probably 4 to 8 in that range. And one of them, when all the media came to her house after the George Cross was announced, and they came to her house, and the next day, I mean, there's 50 reporters there. And all this talk about the George Cross, and one of her daughters, I think it was the youngest one, she didn't know what this was all about, and she said, "The George Cross, Mommy, is that the best you could do?"
Oh, wow.
My God.
It's the highest honor she could possibly get. But then later, when she's a grandmother, one of her granddaughters, the family was watching, the entire family was watching the old movie from 1950. And her dad didn't want to see it. She's in the kitchen working, and the youngest granddaughter comes in, and she's probably 5 at the time, and she says, "Grandmama, did they kill you?"
Oh no!
And I thought that was just the cutest thing. And of course, her dad has a classic response to her little granddaughter. And she says, "No, honey, they could never kill me." Just classic.
You do have photographs in the book also of the ovens, of the German hierarchy coming into the towns. Very disturbing.
Yeah, I gave the full picture. I mean, there's, as Odette would say, I mean, I saw the greatest of humanity and the worst of humanity during, my time during the war. So it's all in there.
So as you're doing the work to create a biography like this, do you find yourself there? It's kind of a weird question, but I mean, does it feel like you are living in that time? Does it, and do you have to in order to do this kind of a book?
I think you do, and no doubt I did. I mean, and every writer's goal is verisimilitude. You want the reader to feel like they're there, and you can only do that if you were there. And the way that you do that, and I think this is true for David McCullough and every other writer of historical biographies, that when you immerse yourself in the files and in the archives, and you're reading what was said at the time, in 1945, and you're reading memo after memo and debriefing after debriefing from all these people, you're there. I mean, I could describe every part about all of the characters in detail, because there's so much material, both in the memoirs and in the archives, that you're there. And I feel like I was a member of the Spindle team. I mean, you've got the radio operator, you've got Odette, you've got Peter, and then I'm there, and I'm another courier, So you just know it so well. You do feel like you're there.
And she was passing messages back and forth, along with doing the translations.
You mean before she left?
Yeah.
Yeah, the translations was a ruse. That was a ruse that they were using. SOE was using to get her to come into the office. Yeah. Because she had asked, I'd like to help the war effort. I'd like to do some translations, and so they said, yeah. But they had no intention of her doing translations. They wanted her as an SOE agent in France. So she didn't do any translation. She did her training, and then she was shipped off to Cassis, France, where she landed.
The book is listed in the Women's Day list of best nonfiction books to read in 2019. So you made their list, which is outstanding. We have so many different quotes on here. Let me just pick one. Codename Lise is impossible to put down. Suffused with romance, told with a novelist's eye for page-turning thrills and the historian's acumen for facts, Loftis brings to colorful life a hero for our time, Odette Sansom. Like Unbroken and Code Girls, Odette Sansom's story is epic, intensely personal, emotionally rich, and hard to forget. That's the quote from the review in the New York Times. From Doug Stanton. I think I had that right. But anyway, you have that kind of quote and all kinds of reviews on the the Amazon page.
Yeah, it's been a great process. We actually just got all of the blurbs basically say the same thing. It's a nonfiction thriller. That's what the Wall Street Journal just put out. That's what Newsday just put out. That's what that's just what's coming. All of these are coming in now because the book just came out yesterday. But so those are hitting now. Newsday, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post is coming out, I think, tomorrow.
Do you know what
possibly even today. So yeah, it's all coming out now.
I'm trying to remember. We had an author on some years ago, and she wrote a book that was fiction. And I'm wondering now that I know this story a little bit, if her book, her fictional book, wasn't based at least part in the story of Lise, of Odette, right?
There hasn't been, unless you're talking about the Penny Starnes book.
Which one?
Penny Starnes, but she's in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Oh, was there any kind of a provision made for Odette's children when she said yes, she would do this in case she doesn't come back? Was there any kind of monetary provision that the government would make
I'm
sure to
sure
take
there
care?
was, and I don't know, but that was her first concern. And of course, she had relatives that they would stay with while she was gone, but I'm sure that there probably was. In fact, Odette herself was given a complete full military disability pension when she got back. But I'm sure there was. I don't know the details of it. That's not in the archive.
That's huge.
Another great interview. Thank you for being on the air with us. Larry Loftis, Loftis. Is that your website also? Is your name your website?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so LarryLoftis.com. I found code name Lise on Amazon, and guess what? He sent us a copy. So if I have one person who would like this copy, call 622-9622. I will just pick one number at random, and one of you can walk away with it. The rest of us have to buy it. It's available not only as a hardcover, which is the one I have, but also as a Kindle and as an audiobook. I can tell from looking at...
You also have book signings, one on the 17th in Vero Beach, one on the 18th in Palm Beach Gardens, on the 19th in Delray Beach, and on the 24th, close to us, is Winter Park.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
So
nice.
it's pretty amazing.
I love it. I mean, we speak to so many authors, and usually the book signings are in New York or L.A. It's nice to have somebody relatively close, right?
Well, there's some other. There's one in D.C. and there's one in where else? Savannah. So there's some around, but those are on. I put them on social media, and they're on my website as well.
All right, Larry, let me just take a moment and give the book away. I picked one at random already. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Linnell. Thank you.
Linnell, you got it. You know where we are, right?
I do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's waiting for you. You're going to like this one. Thank you. Thank you, Linnell. Every reviewer says they couldn't put it down. Robin said she couldn't put it down. So,
Fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and the only reason I could is because I had to go on the air. So,
We'll excuse you for that, Larry.
well, thank you so much for being on the air. That is a great book, and just gave us a great interview. Thank you so much, Larry Loftis.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry and Robin.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
Bob Wine's Camellia Gardens proudly announces the 2019 Camellia Show Spectacular. It's here right now. Come stroll this unique 65-year-old 5-acre garden just beginning to burst in bloom. Better yet, you can get your own famous Bob Wine's Camellias for as little as $9.99 each in your choice colors, red, white, or pink.